We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
I would like to begin by announcing some important developments in our war against the Chinese virus. We'll be invoking the Defense Production Act just in case we need it. In other words, I think you all know what it is, and it can do a lot of good things if we need it, and we will have it all completed, signing it in just a little while, right after I'm finished with this conference. I'll be signing it. It's prepared to go. So we will be invoking the Defense Production Act. Last week I signed an emergency declaration under the Stafford Act, which, as you know, we invoked previously, and which activated FEMA's National Response Coordination Center. FEMA now is fully engaged at the highest levels. Today FEMA is activated in every region. We are at level 1 being the highest level.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It's the 21st of March, 2020, as we are here to document the crisis of our republic, as America is now under arrest in many states, many cities, all across the country. America is under arrest, ladies and gentlemen. The land of the free isn't feeling quite so free anymore as governments take advantage of the coronavirus outbreak. And I do believe they're taking advantage of it. I don't think that this has ever been precedented before, where we have ever shut down the entire country because some people got sick. And I come back to the Centers for Disease Control statistics, which I've come back to a number of times in recent weeks. This thing has killed nowhere near the number of people that the regular flu kills every year, but that doesn't matter. Facts don't matter when you have governments acting like police state officials. Good morning, Vicky.
Good morning, Darren. I personally believe that this is an exercise of global governance.
I have every reason to believe that, and I go a little further, Vicky. I think not only is it an exercise of global governance, but I think our government is being transitioned. I believe it's being transformed into something else. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they haven't decided to crash the monetary system right along with it.
It does seem so, doesn't it?
I mean, here you've taken what everyone has said anyway. Now, we know the money system has been inflationary, well, for many, many years. The 1913 Federal Reserve Act really is the start of the whole thing, but, you could go back to the gold window closing and everything else. The point being, though, is that we've had so many different inflationary things happen, especially in recent years, where the government's just printing money like there's no tomorrow. And Trump has even come out recently. And I don't know how much of this stuff frankly, I think he's being led by the nose because I don't think he's smart enough. I think they pretty much tell him what to do.
I totally agree with you.
When it comes to business, I think Trump's smart. When it comes to national issues, I think there's people around him that. And folks, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm no fan of Trump. Okay, I voted for him the first time. I have no intention of voting for him again because he, the USMCA. He stabbed us in the back. I could go down the list. I mean, he killed the TPP only to incorporate it in the USMCA. I mean, there's any number of things that I'm unhappy with him about. But I think now is the time to set aside party politics or any kind of politics because our country is in peril. And I'm not defending Trump. I'm just stating it the way I see it, the way I believe it is, based only on my observations because that's all you can do with this in this day and age. But as I see the things that are going on, I flipped out when he agreed to invoke, and I do say agreed to invoke, because there were people pressuring him behind the scenes. This Defense Production Act makes him a dictator. It makes him a king, at least over much, part of the economy and the supply chain. What it does is it gives him great powers. He can tell factories that they have to ramp up production. He can do a lot with the supply chain. He can tell them what they have to produce. It's really remarkable. In fact, if you look at, I printed out the whole thing. I didn't have time to go through and highlight the way I wanted to, but it was actually something that was introduced during the Korean War, but it contains three major sections. The first authorizes, and I'm reading from Wikipedia right now. The first authorizes the president to require businesses to sign contracts or fulfill orders deemed necessary for national defense. See, Vicky, as I was listening to some of his speech on how we're fighting this invisible enemy, we're fighting this virus, I couldn't help but go back to 2001 when the War on Terror began. And I was listening to George W. Bush back then talking about an invisible enemy. Mm-hmm. It was striking how similar it was. In fact, I could have gone and taken Trump's words, put them side by side, and I thought about doing that, putting them side by side with George W. Bush's words and comparing them, because I think it would have been a very similar speech. There's a rhythm to the government these days. There's a rhythm, and this rhythm keeps repeating. The rhythm of tyranny. It's always an invisible enemy. It's always somebody in the shadows. It's always somebody trying to get you. And in this case, it's a virus. But this Defense Production Act, they say it also allows the president to designate materials to be prohibited from hoarding or price gouging. Those of you who have reams and reams of toilet paper in your basement, or you've been buying all the toilet paper off the shelves, quit it. It ain't going to save your life. The second section authorizes the president to establish mechanisms such as regulations, orders, or agencies to allocate materials, services, and facilities to promote national defense. The third section authorizes the president to control the civilian economy so that scarce and or critical materials necessary to the national defense effort are available for defense needs. Does that sound like a king to you? He can control the civilian economy?
Go ahead. It does, but I wouldn't object because of what they've done with those trade agreements, except for the fact that he promoted the USMCA. So it's like somebody smiles at you and then punches you in the face.
Yeah.
It's contradictory, and it doesn't make sense.
And speaking of smiling at you and punching you in the face, I just have to really insert real quick here. Tulsi Gabbard dropped out of her presidential race this past week. And promptly endorsed Joe Biden. So for those people on the Democratic side who were looking to her, and it was kind of funny because I saw somebody on Twitter, Tulsi was catching grief, as she should, because she came out and she's this great on foreign policy person and saying all the right things on foreign policy. Now, domestic policy is a different story. But on foreign policy, she was really good and saying the right things and very anti-war. And but then she turns around and endorses one of the biggest warmonger establishment scumbags there ever was. It would be much better if she just walk away and say, no, I'm not endorsing anybody because there's nobody here in the race worth endorsing. But no, she doesn't do that. She falls right in line just like the scumbag Bernie Sanders did.
Well, you got to be on Team A or Team B. Heaven forbid that you think for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. The herd mentality. So she was catching some heat on Twitter, as I think she should. And somebody posted there, I'm still with you. I still stand by you, Tulsi. So I just real quickly responded. I said, that's why you're part of the problem.
Good.
Because
folks, I
folks,
think at this point it's all about just collecting delegates and whatever delegates the parties that don't go all the way, the people that don't go all the way, they'll be able to use those for negotiation.
Well, I don't think she had that many delegates anyway. I think she only had one or two. But the point is that it doesn't matter. Why endorse Joe Biden? He's an establishment shill. The guy barely knows who he is. He barely knows where he is at a given time. He's apparently got dementia. But, that's the best part. That's the best thing I like about him. He makes me laugh at least. But he's an establishment shill all the way, and he's been caught in so many lies. Anyway, I'm getting off track.
It will let the Democrats actually select the president, by way of the vice presidency.
Yeah, well,
because Joe Biden is not going to make it through 4 years. He can't. He's as you say, he already has dementia. So
I see Hillary Clinton. Maybe being his VP, but that's just me. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, the point is that it doesn't matter because the deep state is very much in charge, and the deep state, in my opinion, is very much in charge of this presidency. And people will continue to support Trump even if he declares martial law. That's the amazing thing about it. The act also authorizes the president to requisition property, force industry, to expand production and the supply of basic resources, impose wage and price controls. Now that has been repealed, that part of it, the wage and price controls. Because like I say, I printed this out. So that part of it is not true. Settle labor disputes. Again, that part of it has also been repealed. Control consumer and real estate credit. Establish contractual priorities, and allocate raw materials toward national defense. This is a wartime bill, folks, and this is being used in peacetime. We are on the federal government is on a war footing. Now, they claim it's a war against a virus. Are you the virus? That's what I want to know, because you people are the ones that are being told you're not allowed. In the land of the free now, you're not allowed to go to a show. In the land of the free, you're being told you can't go to the movie theater. In the land of the free, you are being told you can't go to a restaurant. You're not allowed to do these things. In some places, New York, California, Illinois is trying to take away the guns. New Orleans is trying to take away the guns. But in this land of the free, you're told that you're not allowed to go outside your house. In many places. Now, tell me, are you the virus? Because that's what it looks like to me.
Kind of would seem so, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And nobody seems to be asking these questions because everybody seems to think that all of this stuff is necessary. I have a real problem with this right now. I don't see anybody asking, I'm sure there probably are somewhere, But not enough people are asking any questions about this government overreach that we're seeing develop all around us.
Overreach? That's an understatement.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. Say what you want. Say what you want about Alex Jones. But at least his lawyer... Well, we play the audio from Fauci, that Dr. Fauci, which I don't trust. The guy's always got this funny smirk on his face. But last week on this very show, we played audio from Fox News about how he was talking about how he wants to see, or at least he thought a military-style, Italy-style lockdown, because, locking down citizens seems to be a worldwide thing now, as France and Germany and Italy have done it. But Dr. Fauci wants to see it here.
Italy just announced that it is going to lock down an entire region of northern Italy that includes Milan and Venice, with a quarter of the population, millions of people. Nobody's going to be allowed, except under extraordinary circumstances, to go in or to go out.
Right.
Could that happen here?
We have to be realistic. I don't think it would be as draconian as nobody in and nobody out, but there'll be, if we continue to get cases like this, particularly at the community level, there will be what we call mitigation, where you'll have to do essentially social distancing, keep people out of crowded places, take a look at seriousness. Do you really need to travel? Those kinds of things. And I think it's particularly important among the most vulnerable. And that's the thing that the CDC and the State Department are going to be making some recommendations about how people who have underlying conditions, those are the most vulnerable ones, particularly elderly with underlying conditions, heart disease, chronic lung disease, diabetes, to do right now, not wait, but right now, to sort of take a look at things that are at high risk, crowded places, getting on airplanes, and absolutely don't get on a cruise ship.
So I want to press this question, though, of Italy.
Right.
Could you see a situation, you had a lot of talk about Seattle and what's going on there, where a city is shut down or a state or a region is shut down, and you basically just say, and in the case of Italy, it's till April 3rd, nobody in, nobody out?
It's possible. I think what you need to do on real-time basis, and that's the reason why we evaluate it literally every single day. You don't want to alarm people, but given the spread we see, anything is possible. And that's the reason why we've got to be prepared to take whatever action is appropriate to contain and mitigate the outbreak.
So I said, say what you want about Alex Jones. His lawyer has now prepared a lawsuit and is threatening to sue the Trump administration if they impose an interstate travel ban.
We have drafted a lawsuit styled Alex Jones versus Donald Trump et al., naming a number of Trump's cabinet officials. In the event that President Trump announces an interstate travel ban or something like it, we will go immediately into a District of Columbia court and ask for injunctive and declaratory relief. In other words, a ruling from a judge that the action is unlawful and an order from the judge barring implementation of it. If that judge rejects our claim, we will go to the D.C. Court of Appeals. If that court rejects our claim, we will seek a hearing in the United States Supreme Court. In our view, while the COVID-19 crisis does present a real and present danger to public health, there is also something significant at stake, and that is our fundamental freedoms and rights as Americans. The country has weathered many storms, ranging from World War to other epidemics, I think of polio in the 50s, but we've never once resorted to an abandonment of constitutional principles. So, Alex, I think you may be posting this online. I'm not sure. The writ is drafted. The paperwork's ready to go. We simply await an order from the president, and then we hope to be first in court to challenge.
Hopefully that won't be necessary.
I would join that as a friend of the court, amicus brief, as a friend of the court.
Yeah.
Adding, what I think about it. That wouldn't have anything to do with their suit, and it's just kind of a statement of what I think. But, yeah, I'm glad they're doing that.
Yeah, and like I say what you want about Alex Jones, but I was really glad to hear that. Hopefully there would be many people filing lawsuits. Hopefully they would be flooded with protests.
I would hope so.
Because I can't imagine the America as we know it dying without a whimper.
Well, you know what the problem is that all of our agencies of government have been corrupted by this global governing thing. In September of the year 2000, Bill Clinton signed the Millennium Declaration, and I'm just realizing how significant that really was. That was the Declaration for Global Governance. And we've been, since the year 2000, I mean, it's just been one thing after another.
Yeah.
But nobody is telling the people what it is, and it doesn't seem that Congress is doing anything about it, and obviously the reason why is because they are the ones that sold us out with all the trade agreements. I mean, we should have gotten out of the UN almost, after it was created. It was created by communists. It's being run by communists. They are building a communist global governing system.
Yeah. Finishing up this Defense Production Act real quick. The President's authority to place contracts under DPA is the part of the Act most often used by the Department of Defense since the 1970s. Most of the other functions of the Act are administered by the Office of Strategic Industries and Economic Security at the Bureau of Industry and Security in the Department of Commerce. The Defense Priorities and Allocations System institutes a rating system for contracts and purchase orders. The highest priority is DX, that's the highest priority, which must be approved by the Secretary of Defense. The next level down is DO, and below that are unrated contracts. So anyway, that's, and they talk about usage over time and things like that. I guess Obama invoked this at some point. Obama as part of efforts to combat Chinese espionage, which makes more sense than this. I don't know why you would need to invoke the Defense Production Act for that, but anyway, that's...
Maybe that's why they started developing 5G rather than buying the Huawei version.
Yeah, maybe so. But, these days, we get up. Every day I get up, and it's like there's new horrors. Every day. Well, every day I look at all the alerts that have come down.
That is the one positive thing about this, is that people are understanding supply chain.
Well, maybe people. I don't think they're fully understanding supply. They're understanding that there could be disruptions. I think. I don't think they fully understand it.
As long as they understand that we need to be self-sufficient in the things that we need, that's all they need to know.
The problem is they're buying it all up now.
Well, yeah, because they created a panic.
Yes.
But that panic will go away. I mean, all they have to do is say, you can buy one item only, period.
Well, the stores have already done that here. At least they've limited certain things to 5. And what they're doing now, these 24-hour operating stores are now shutting down at night because they literally don't have time to stock the shelves. They literally do not have time. I mean, if they try to put anything on the shelf, it's gone just as quick as they put it up there.
They're doing that here, too.
Yeah. So, and one other thing I do like that they're doing is that they've instituted special hours for the elderly. Because, these elderly people, many of them are on, probably most of them are on fixed incomes. And so...
Tell me about it. I went to the store on Walmart yesterday, and I was able to buy some macaroni. How's that?
Yeah. Well, it's nice because the problem is before people were buying everything up so quick and in such great quantities that by the time elderly folks got there, there was literally nothing left. And so, I mean, you could see a situation where potentially they could starve to death because they can't get it. But this is what happens when people don't. But, I can understand the fear. I can understand the stress. And many of us have been stressed as we've watched these things transpire. The biggest thing that I was worried about is a multi-month lockdown, a national lockdown. And I'm still concerned about that. Now, in places, I guess, where they've done it, they've at least let people go out to the store if they need something. But, I mean, you consider looking around you at what you have now, and that being all that you're ever going to get for however long it lasts, and you don't know how long that's going to last.
But nobody would
prepared.
stay in the house if they're starving. If they're hungry, they're going out. Even if they have to go out shooting, you know.
Yeah, well, if you can be prepared for a situation like that, you can be prepared and be okay for a number of months. But how do you know how long it's going to last? And that's the problem.
Well, I don't know what you mean you can be okay for a couple of... I couldn't last a couple of months.
I mean, certain people could. You know.
Yeah, certain people could. I'm not me.
Yeah, well, not everybody. There's a lot of people that wouldn't. You know, if you got a deep freezer or something, you know, you might be okay for a while. But the point is everybody's got different levels of preparedness. You know, and you do what you can, the best you can. But there's limits to everything, is my point. No matter how hard you try, there's limits to everything. Anyway, we're at the bottom of the hour already. Stay with us, folks. We got a lot more to cover as the next 2.5 hours is going to be a very fast ride. This is Govern America. Vicky Davis is here. I'm Darren Weeks. Don't go away.
Spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
Welcome back to the broadcast. This is Govern America. The website is governamerica.com. That's governamerica.com. That's the website for the show. And Vicky, go ahead and give your information out, please.
Yeah, my newer website is thetechnocratictyranny.com. And my older website is channelingreality.com, and they're cross-linked, so you can get to one from the other. And my email address is eyeswideoopen at channelingreality.com.
All right.
That's also on both websites. So.
All right, very good. We have a phone call on the line already, and folks, you're welcome to join in as well. 610-600-1776. It'll be interesting to hear reports across the country about what's going on in your neck of the woods. 610-600-1776. Or if you don't have free long distance, you can call toll-free 844-646-8376. That's toll-free 844-6-GOVERN. 844-646-8376. Let's go to Colorado. And hello, you're on the air.
Hello, Darren. This is Melody.
Hi, Melody.
Hi. Yeah. It's definitely affecting us in this area, and needless to say, they threaten our license and a fine if we do any massage, which is what I do. And that's, they told us we couldn't have anybody gatherings of more than 10 or more, but, we're still not allowed to be in a one-on-one basis or anything. So I really see this more as an economic
takedown
factor. There's so many indicators there that I just don't know what to say when people just get caught up in all this hysteria over the flu.
Yeah.
Even though, there's definitely concerns, but it's nothing new,
No, it's not.
Well, you know what? I had the flu about in 2009, and I was really sick. I ended up having to go to the hospital, and they gave me fluids, and that emergency room was just packed with people. But never called an emergency then. It was an emergency for that emergency room. But they never called it then. This so-called emergency doesn't seem to be happening like that.
Well, they're also here in Michigan. If you get minor injuries now, they won't even take you into the ER.
Well, they were telling us that we've got like the National Guard here, and they were telling us that in order for us to have the National Guard do the test, which when you hear what they do by sticking that swab way up your nose into the back of your throat, that enough alone is to make me think twice about anybody testing me for it. And what good is it going to do other than inform them? But if they give so many discrepancy numbers because they don't have any kind of a bar as to what it all means, I don't know what to say other than the fact that we need to start thinking logically and know what all the events that are building up to this point. But I was listening to Darren Shoof's program earlier, and somebody came on stating that Bill Gates is the one that owns the virus or patent.
Yeah, I have been meaning to run that down. There was evidently a patent on this thing or something similar to it. Just before this whole thing started. And, that brings us to a lot of things. Weird things were going on. There's some drills I wanted to cover. The topic came up, I think it was John in Tennessee last week, that brought up this exercise 201 that took place just prior to the event. I watched every one of them, those videos from that event, and I've got a bunch of audio from it that I'm going to share today.
Is this the one in China?
No, this is the one right here in the United States. I'm not sure what location, where it was held exactly, but this was an exercise. They simulated basically everything that's going on right now. There were a number of different things. In fact, there's a separate exercise. There was exercise 201, but there was also something called Crimson Contagion. This was a Health and Human Services exercise. I'm looking at a New York Times article that just came out, March 20th. That was yesterday.
Isn't the Crimson the name of the Harvard magazine or Harvard paper?
Probably, yeah. Crimson. I
okay.
You might be right, but this is an article. Crimson Contagion is the name of the program, the operation. It was the code name. I'll just share a little of this with you ladies. Before virus outbreak, a cascade of warnings went unheeded. Government exercises, including one last year, made clear that the U.S. was not ready for a pandemic like the coronavirus, but little was done. They say in here, and they go through a scenario, and they say that scenario, codenamed Crimson Contagion, was imagining an influenza pandemic. It was simulated by the Trump administration's Department of Health and Human Services in a series of exercises that ran from last January to August. The simulation's sobering results, contained in a draft report dated October 2019 that was not previously reported, drove home just how underfunded, underprepared, and uncoordinated the federal government would be for a life or death battle with a virus for which no treatment existed. The draft report marked not to be disclosed. Now, why would it be? Why would they care that it's disclosed, folks? But it was marked not to be disclosed. It laid out in stark detail repeated cases of confusion in the exercise. Federal agencies jockeyed over who was in charge. State officials and hospitals struggled to figure out what kind of equipment was stockpiled or available. Cities and states went their own ways on school closings. Many of the potentially deadly consequences of a failure to address the shortcomings are now playing out in all too real fashion across the country. So there's other things I could read from this article, They say what the scenario makes clear, however, is that his own administration, that's Trump's administration, had already modeled a similar pandemic and understood its potential trajectory. Asked at a news briefing Thursday about the government's preparedness, Trump responded, nobody knew that there would be a pandemic or epidemic of this proportion. Nobody has ever seen anything like this before. The work done over the past 5 years, the New York Times says, however, demonstrates that the government had considerable knowledge about the risks of a pandemic and accurately predicted the very types of problems Mr. Trump is now scrambling belatedly to address. I'm sure Trump himself didn't even know this study was going on. But the point is
when you look at
here they are rehearsing. They're rehearsing. They're rehearsing the very thing that's going on right now. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But I don't see this as the primary thing that's taking place. I mean, yes, they have these things every year, one way or the other. I mean, they keep messing with these bioweapons. Again, somebody on Darren Shoof's show said had some thousands of releases of bioweapons that had gotten out of these labs. It's as though this is supposed to happen, but when you really look at what the consequences of it's going to be, and you know, one of their primary concerns is depopulating the planet. It's like they really don't care if it's a comedy of errors on these pandemics. But what they really do have experiences at is the bankers around the world go in and do the same scenarios over and over and over again on how they bring the people down, put them into debt, and sink their country and put them under their control. Well, with all this, small business is going to be, many of them are not going to make it.
That's right.
And this thing is, to me, what is really the factor here.
I believe what they're doing is they're crashing the economy. I don't see they've taken what was a robust economy, even with all of its problems. The underlying structure was in disarray for sure, by design, but it was a good economy, and they've taken it completely and deliberately trashed it. So we have to ask ourselves some very serious questions here. Why would they do that? And the only reason some people who go ahead.
Okay, there's a video called Trail of the Troika on YouTube where you have a foreign journalist that goes in and starts interviewing a number of the bankers and heads of these various countries that went through a lot of the economic crisis with the banking system over in Greece and Portugal, Spain, Ireland. And these people have no, they're total sociopaths. They have no feelings. It's all about money. And they go in and just take these places down one at a time. But we've been doing that around the world. According to, I think it was John Perkins when he wrote that book, Secrets of an Economic Hitman, we just go into what country after country after country, and if they don't bend to our demands on trying to put in these expensive infrastructure projects, then they go in and create wars. Well, what have we done? Since I was born, we've done this over and over and over again, and we seem to be the tool that they use as far as our armies.
Yeah.
So
that does seem to be the position of the United States under this psycho global system under the UN. I don't know what the big countries in there are Russia or the Soviet Union, China, and the United States, with England and France as the two smaller in betweens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they keep threatening they're going to sink the dollar, but there's no way they're going to do that. At least initially up front, there's all the drug dealers and the cartels deal in dollars, and there's so much money stashed all over.
I wouldn't be so sure. I mean, you have the Bretton Woods Agreement, and the oil is being tanked right now. there was a deal with Saudi Arabia tried to get the other countries to ramp up production of oil. Russia refused. They said, we're not playing along, and so consequently the Saudi Arabians said, okay, fine, we'll flood the market with oil, which forces prices down. The problem is the dollar is connected to the oil. And many of the things that Saudi Arabia does, they don't do unless the United States is right behind it. So it could be, and I'm not an insider, obviously, so I'm an outsider looking in trying to figure it all out. But it could be that they decided now's the time. And because
that part I wouldn't be surprised, and they're definitely putting in a new economic system and governmental system here, or what they.
Well, they've wanted to transfer the monetary system to a system of a world currency. Nationhood is out.
Right.
That's what the plan has been for a long time. And as I see this thing playing out, it makes a lot of sense to me. You were going to say something, Vicky?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a digital currency, in which case Melody's right, about the drug dealers having billions and billions stashed. They won't be able to spend it if the Treasury and the world bankers flip over to electronic currency. Now, it won't be like Bitcoin. Forget Bitcoin. All of my transactions are basically with my debit card on my account. And I don't, there's almost nothing that I can't buy or, with my debit card. So.
I'm a little confused, though, as to why they would care about the drug dealers.
Money.
Well, the CIA is the biggest drug dealer, and putting the other drug dealers out of business would probably be a win for them.
Well, there you go. There's your answer.
So, I don't know. Anyway, hey, Melody, thank you for the call. I got a couple other calls on the line.
All right.
I appreciate that.
All right, thanks.
Yep. Have a good one. Let's go to Washington State. Hello, Washington State. You're on the air. And by the way, folks, I just want to say real quick, sorry for the noise on the line. I meant to get somebody out here this week to look at that. Every time the weather changes, it seems like I got problems with these lines. But anyway, we'll do the best we can to get through it. Go ahead, Washington State.
Hi, this is Jenna. And the John Hopkins Center for Health Security to host the Event 201,
yes,
the Global Pandemic Exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It says at the top of the article, I put it in the chat, New York City. Washington State is no different. I'm expecting some sort of self-quarantine, but at this point, a lot of social distancing, and Jay Inslee is, shutting down things. I went to a big box store. There was a line outside only letting 100 people in at a time.
I'm surprised they're allowing that many in.
Yeah, it's like a big Costco. It was a Winco, a cooperative big box.
Mm-hmm.
I really think this is a perfect revolutionary suggestion to plant the garden, plant the seeds.
Yes.
Ahead to 60 days.
If you can get seeds.
Have some greens up.
I have a feeling there's going to be a run on seeds here very soon. What do you think?
Well, I've been saving my seeds over the years, but
good for you.
I would think that would be people's first thought. We're lucky we're in springtime. Things will grow. Potatoes in the ground. There's things that people can start to do at home while they're quarantined. I've seen raised beds on a hay bale. A brush pile. The Hugo culture is a lot of just debris, grass, brush, and then making some biochar. Those things all can be done at home. And thinking about how the weather patterns can be controlled. Wildfires aren't out of the question. Earthquakes. they flooded the Midwest.
Yeah.
Relying on stores has been shown that, no, you're going to stay at home and you might as well try. And there's a lot to do right now. This time of year, all the seeds can be planted indoors. You can figure out plastic coverings to keep them warm. For starting, if you don't have a greenhouse, you can be starting things in small scale, but a little bit is a little bit to look forward to.
Yeah.
And
I have a feeling there's going to be a whole lot of people that are going to be, for the first time in their lives, trying their hand at some gardening.
Absolutely.
I guarantee you it won't be me. I'll just turn myself into the gas chamber.
Well, I actually like gardening, although I'm not terribly good at it. The last time I had some critter come along, I had some really nice plants. I mean, I had it really going good. And then overnight, some critter came along and ate everything right. I mean, ate all of my plants. I mean, they were gone. And it was, nothing will take the wind out of your sails quicker than some critter coming along and eating everything that you worked so hard to. I wouldn't care if they helped eat it if they would help hoe,
Right.
They don't do any of the work, though. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jenna. You got anything else?
All that. No. I guess that's all I have. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Stay safe out there in Washington State. All right, let's go to anonymous caller. Hello, anonymous caller. You're on the air.
Hey, Darren. Hey, Vicky. It's Art.
Yeah, you're no longer anonymous anymore.
Yeah, right.
How's things going on in, I guess it's Georgia, right?
Yes, sir. Well, we can't get ground beef anymore. It's all the vendors are out. We can't get it. Toilet paper's kind of scarce, and yeah, it's pretty typical as everybody else. It's kind of weird though. But I wanted to talk about the Event 201 that, like you I heard about it last week. I've been researching it all week. I've been all over this thing. It actually took place in Washington, D.C. Some say Baltimore, but no, it was Washington, D.C. is where it was actually held. It was put on by the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, the CDC, the United Nations Foundation, the
Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yep. Bloomberg, NBC, and you can actually go to centerforhealthsecurity.org/event201, and there it is, right there in black and white. And other colors as well. And all 5 parts of the exercise were on are on YouTube. And I tell you what, Darren, it was really interesting to sit and just watch this 5-part thing play out. And I'm looking and I'm watching these things as they're talking about things, and I'm correlating with what's
going on right now.
Thinking to myself, holy guacamole.
Yeah, it is incredible. As the listeners here will see as we progress, because I'm going to get to some of this audio. I did a number of clips for this, and it is incredible seeing how everything lines up almost perfectly. I mean, this is like a script.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the you know how psychopaths. I've watched lots of police movies and things. And psychopaths like to put it right in your face, what they're doing, because they think they're smarter than you are. And you'll never figure it out, even if they give you, like, in-your-face clues and things. So, but that's kind of what this sounds like.
Yeah, it does sound like it. Well, it looks like. Go ahead, Art.
Well, what was interesting is, as I was watching this, somebody just happened to shoot me an email and said, and wanted to know if there was any truth to the rumors that it had slipped out from possibly Fort Detrick. And so, I start researching, and holy crap, here's a timeline, guys. I ended up doing...
Okay, before you go on, Art, before you say that, it's funny that you should mention that, because I'm looking right now, an article that I meant to cover last week on the show here, New York Times, I believe is where it came from. Deadly germ research is shut down at Army lab over safety concerns. Is that the one you're getting ready to talk about?
Well, that's part of it.
Problems with disposal and dangerous materials led the government to suspend research at the military's leading biodefense center. That was dated August 5th, 2019.
Yep. So let's go back to March 11th when the globalresearch.org, I love them. They're a great website for information. In putting together my timeline, what I learned, and here basically in a nutshell, between 2005 and 2012, there were, as the previous lady, she heard me on Farron's broadcast talking about this. Between 2005 and 2012, there were 1,059 events where pathogens either were stolen or somehow escaped from American biolabs. This was between 2005 and 2012. In 2015, what another previous caller had mentioned, Ralph Baric, infectious disease researcher at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, published a study November 9th of 2015 on his team's efforts to engineer a virus with the surface protein of the SHC-014 coronavirus, which is found only in the horseshoe bats that live in the China province, and the backbone of one that causes a human-like severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS. And this hybrid could indeed, in fact, infect American airway cells, causing diseases. Then we have August of last year, a series of lung infections broke out right here in America, and a Taiwanese physician was able to actually come out because, remember they were talking about all of this was caused by the vaping and the e-cigarettes last year in August?
Yeah.
Well, a Taiwanese physician, I forget his name, he actually came out and proved, when looking at symptoms and everything, that that what they were experiencing were the effects of a coronavirus.
Yeah, people were saying that they had popcorn lung and things like that.
Right, but immediately prior to this is where that headline that you read came out, Deadly Germ Research Shut Down, last year, okay? So now we move a little bit forward into around...
Okay, hold on. We got to move forward into the top of the hour break. So I'll hold you over a few minutes after into the next hour. Stay with us, folks. This is Governor America. Again, sorry about the problems with the static on the line. I'll make it a point to get that work done this week. We'll be back.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order. New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America, hour number 2. It continues to be the 21st of March, 2020, as we get right back into it, talking about pandemics, exercises, drills that go live. Seems to be a pattern. Drills that go live over and over again. Contagions.
Yeah, well, that's the way it started in 2001. I have I guess it was a PowerPoint or something. Anyway, the military was doing train like we fight. So they were doing live fire drills, which means that they're doing it. I mean, it's not a drill if you're doing it live fire, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so...
That's another one of those word games that they play.
We've got all these pathogens that they're playing with and have been playing with for years. Anyway, we have Art on the line from Georgia. Go ahead, Art. You were giving us a quick timeline of some things that were going on. You want to finish that up?
Yeah. So to sum it up, 2005, 2012, 1,059 pathogens somehow get out of American bioweapons lab, either stolen or escaped. That's scary in and of itself. 2015, we have the research going on at North Carolina Chapel Hill to extract and sequence the DNA strain from the horseshoe bat of China, and another one that causes SARS-like symptoms and could infect human airways. So we got that research going on in 2015. Then we have August last year, we got the Taiwanese physician doing the research to prove that vaping and e-cigarettes were not causing the outbreaks that we saw in August of the lung diseases. It was, in fact, a coronavirus. Prior to that, we got Fort Detrick shutting down early August of last year. Fast forward to October, which is where we left off at the break. 300 U.S. military people go to the Wuhan province of China.
Yeah.
Where they have the military
games
equivalent of the of the World Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now it's believed that what some are saying is they believe that some of those soldiers had, unbeknownst to them, been infected by the virus, one of these viruses, because after all, that's why Fort Detrick was shut down, because of the leaks. So they think that someone, or maybe a couple of these soldiers were infected, went over there, and this is in August.
Well, not only that, but China went a step further and said that they believe that they think that they brought them in maliciously. It wasn't just that they were infected. Right. They were performing in the games, and they did very poorly, which normally they do very well. So the conspiracy theory is, and it is a conspiracy theory at this point, but I think it's interesting, is that they brought the virus in, and in fact, they were staying in quarters that was near that seafood city, that seafood market. Go ahead.
Right. So this puts the 300 U.S. soldiers, the China's weapons lab, and the wet market all pretty much right in the same vicinity. Very convenient there. Mm-hmm. At the same time we've got that going on, these Olympics, we've got the Event 201 global pandemic exercise taking place here in the United States, right at the same exact time. So while these people are being infected, we got this exercise going on, and we've got world leaders and business leaders actually there present, people from China and Germany and other countries all there doing this exercise. And now all of a sudden we see the very thing that they were training for and the very reason that these weapons labs and stuff were closed down. This is the timeline, and this is what a lot of people are not talking about. I have not heard one person put together a timeline. I'm just getting started on this, and who knows what else we might learn in the process.
Yeah,
Timelines are important.
I'm sure more and more we're going to hear more things. Well, the static has gotten pretty bad, Art, for some reason. Maybe you're saying all the right things. Who knows? But I'm going to go ahead and let you go because we can hardly hear you anyway. So, hey, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Whoops, I shut my own mic off. That's no good. So, anyway, I will get that work done, folks, this week.
Well, that cleared it up, turning off your mic.
No. I turned off. I turned off the phone.
Oh.
I just happened to turn off my own mic at the same time.
Well, it cleared up exactly after you said that.
No, so. I muted it. I got rid of it.
Oh. Well.
Yeah. It's probably still doing it, I'm sure. Anyway, here's the thing, folks. We got the Army Fort Detrick thing. Art was talking about it, too. That was reported in the New York Times. As I said, the article for that was dated August 5th, 2019. Now, it may or may not be related. And I want to make that clear. I'm not trying to conflate the two things. This could be totally unrelated. It's just interesting that it happened along that timeline. We know, though...
Just an amazing coincidence, Darren.
Well, it could have been. It could have been. Whether it's an accident, whether it's real. See, here's the thing, folks. Whether it's an accident or whether it's planned, I meant. The point is, folks, they're using this... Just like Rahm Emanuel said, here we go again.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
And this is what they're going to do. They're going to use whatever crisis there is, and this is a big crisis now, because it's being engineered to be so.
Planned and executed crises.
That's what it looks like to me. October 9th, 2003, the Sunshine Project talked about recreating the Spanish flu. Now, this is an article, by the way, that I don't believe you can get to anymore, except I had to go back to the Wayback Machine to get it. But they talked about influenza as a bioweapon. It does not sound like a particularly grave threat. Annual outbreaks kill many people, particularly the elderly, but a case of the flu is generally perceived as an uncomfortable nuisance rather than a grave threat. But flu viruses can be devastating. In 1918 and 1919, the so-called Spanish flu killed an estimated 20 to 40 million people worldwide, and since then the highly changeable flu virus, that's what it says, highly changeable, has resurfaced in a variety of particularly virulent forms. And now they go on to say... So, a couple paragraphs down, U.S. scientists led by the Pentagon, a Pentagon pathologist, recently began to genetically reconstruct the specifically dangerous 1918 influenza strain. In one experiment, a partially reconstructed 1918 virus killed mice, while virus constructs with genes from a contemporary flu virus had hardly any effect. Now, that was 2003. And they say attempts to recover the virus date back to the 1950s. Why would you want to do this? Well, they want to kill people, evidently, or at least they want to be able to have the ability to kill people. Here we see...
Well, people aren't worth much in the global economy.
No.
They're just commodities.
Yeah, you're a number.
So, yeah, they went to a lot of trouble to set up the entire... the genetic research infrastructure, connecting up universities around the world to do genetic research and biomedicine. So,
yeah,
it's just collateral damage if people die.
Well, it's a plus for them because you got too many. The world's population, in their view, need to be culled anyway, right? They keep telling us we're overpopulated. You can jump on a plane when you could fly and look down, and all you see, mostly what you see is green, open fields, empty space, but supposedly there's no place to put anybody on the planet. Anyway, the point is that we see from The Guardian, security fears as flu virus that killed 50 million is recreated. That's another one. That was from October 6, 2005. That was a couple of years after the previous one from the Sunshine Project. Then we have by the way, interesting thing, these statistics. When we're talking about the Spanish flu virus, Wikipedia has been apparently adjusting down the casualty rate for the 1918 Spanish flu virus. Evidently, they've gone from 20% down to 2%. This was noticed by a publication called offguardian.org. So I thought that was just an interesting side note. Why would they adjust down unless they're trying to make the present circumstance look a lot more ominous?
you can't trust any of the statistics coming out of this government.
Well, this is Wikipedia.
They just use statistics to prove whatever they want to prove.
Well, if you can't trust the statistics coming out of the government, you certainly can't trust it coming out of the Wikipedia, because it's a propagandistic mouthpiece for the establishment, that's for sure.
Footnotes are great, though.
Yeah, I mean, if you know how to use Wikipedia, you're right. It can be a very valuable resource. But whatever you read in the main text, you better take with a grain of salt. So, in the meantime, USA Today reported on August 1st, 2006. Now, this is something that, to me, just really says it all. New virus, less than pandemic. They say, using a new method to test potential pandemic flu strains, scientists have created a virus that contains genes from human and bird flus and found it lacks what it takes to cause a pandemic. How disappointing, huh? The researchers combined genes from a human flu strain, H3N2 and H5N1 bird flu, that emerged in Hong Kong in 1997. Now, I'm not going to get into all of this. Skipping down here, they say the experiments were risky and that the possibility was there that a highly transmissible pandemic strain might have been created in the lab. So this is what they've been after for many, many years. That's the point, folks. They've been messing with these things. And here we are today with a major pandemic, which some say came from the United States. And of course, Trump is very adamant about saying it's the Chinese virus. You know, he's every time he references it now, he calls it the China virus or the Chinese virus.
He's just needling them. But I'm wondering, or I don't know if I remember this from past reading, but it seems to me like viruses were a good mechanism for genetic modification. You know, injecting a virus that penetrates a cell and modifies the DNA. But don't quote me on that.
Yeah,
something to research.
I don't know anything about that, although the things that are... Here's the problem that I have with all of this, Vicky, is that they want to produce... Well, there's many problems I have with it, but one of the problems is that they want to produce a vaccine. They're rushing out a vaccine. Supposedly the process is supposed to take years, or a year at least, a year and a half. They're trying to produce a vaccine, rush it out, and my question is, are they going to try to force this on the population? I'm not taking a vaccine.
I'm not taking their vaccine. I'm not taking any of their vaccines.
But, you know, the State Emergency Health Powers Act, which was passed by over 34 states, I'm not quite sure exactly the number, but I know at least 34 states passed it, have provisions to mandate vaccinations. And it could be that I'm telling you folks, right now, it looks like your state governments are going to be the biggest concern that you're going to have to worry about. You know, including martial law and militaristic types of things. As we said, some states are already locked down. I won't say many, but there are towns all across the country, too, that are being locked down. I know here in Michigan, our governor, in fact, I got the audio on this, they were talking about, she was on the Michael Patrick Shields show, and he asked her about martial law.
I would anticipate that there will be more cases that are going to come in. No one should be surprised by that. As we are assessing continuing issuing some additional orders, we will make them known in real time at the earliest moment. But we have to ensure we're doing our due diligence and thinking through all the different associated challenges.
Could we get to a position where it's sort of like martial law, where everything's closed and everybody stays home, like it is in Italy, for instance, where you only have the hospitals and the drugstores open?
I think we have to make decisions based on where the facts and science dictate. At this juncture, it's too early to make any statements. It wouldn't be responsible to make any statements on that front. I will tell you this. Every decision we make, we will be transparent about it, what's driving the decision. We will share it as quickly as we can with the public once the decision has been made, and we will always put the health and safety of the people of the state first and foremost, and that will drive all decisions. There are scenarios that people can conjure that would create a lot of different responsibilities on my part. At this juncture, it's too early, and it would be irresponsible to start playing out all those scenarios.
Okay.
Just ask that everyone does their part, that everyone keeps their head about them, and that you stay tuned in and are following this closely.
That was not a no.
Yeah.
That was not a no. California Governor Gavin Newsom, he's also preparing for martial law.
You're now on notice in case they're needed during the coronavirus pandemic. Governor Newsom placed the California National Guard on alert. He said they should be prepared to perform humanitarian missions like distributing food and supplies. Troops will also support public safety if it's needed.
Did you hear that? It's the ends you need to pay attention to.
I was thinking they might start doing that with like Meals on Wheels for senior citizens.
I have no problem with them helping with it.
I would not take the food that they prepare.
I have
all of these people. That woman said, "We'll just decide based on the facts and the science." Well, both of those things are being manipulated. So I don't trust any of them.
Well, the woman was Gretchen Whitmer. She's the governor here in Michigan. But I didn't say that before. That's why I inserted it now. But I don't have a problem with the National Guard helping out in certain capacities. The problem is with domestic law enforcement. That's the distinction. We don't want, because that really is the martial law type of situation. When you have the militaristic, basically soldiers policing the population. There's a reason why we don't want that here in America. You should have...
I don't think we're in America anymore. I think we are in the North American common market.
Well, we're under the National Defense Authorization Act 2012, which declared the United States a battlefield with indefinite detention without due process. It's the NDAA 2012 did that. And we're also in an age of propaganda. The NDAA 2013 repealed the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, remember, allowing materials produced by the State Department and the Broadcasting Board of Governors to be released within the United States, U.S. borders. So we're being propagandized regularly. Now, I think we were before, but now it's just they're taking it to a whole new level now. It's pretty amazing.
Interesting. There seemed to be kind of a rollover, and now Trump and his people are really liking Andrew Cuomo. Is he the governor of New York?
Yeah.
He's doing exactly the right thing.
Yeah.
I think we were bamboozled with Trump.
Well, I don't doubt that one bit. And how much of this is he knowledgeable about? Some of it might. What it looks like to me is that he's being cowed into a lot of this. But that's just, and I'm not defending him. I'm just observing, because when he invoked the Defense Production Act, I was really ticked. But as I look at it, Nancy Pelosi was even pressuring him to do that. There was pressure that was being builded
because of the trade war with China, the alleged trade war with China. We don't really know if there is one or not, but that part doesn't bother me. It's the closing down of businesses, just shutting them down, and all of this terrorizing people about this virus. That really bothers me.
Well, you're not allowed to go to shows, as we said. You're not allowed to go, in many cases, go outside your house, out on the streets. You're not allowed to go to theaters, restaurants, sporting events. No sporting events are allowed now. They shut down the sports. So this is all in the land of the free.
It's like they're converting to the virtual country.
Yeah.
Everything you need, everything you want is on the internet. So
get back to your
maybe
computer,
they're just
slave.
getting people conditioned for staying within their own four walls.
Yeah, bars, restaurants, other businesses have been ordered to close. Entire states, as I said, Illinois, California, New York are the ones I know about off the top of my head. Here's a different report from Bloomberg.
We're seeing stringent steps from coast to coast. As you mentioned there, California, the most aggressive we are seeing. And as you mentioned in your open there, putting pressure on the U.S. dollar, 40 million residents stay-in-place order. Here in New York State, Governor Andrew Cuomo is saying most non-essential staff need to stay home. About 75% of businesses should be working from home. Nara, you and I are both in offices, but behind the scenes, we know lots of producers, directors are actually staying at home. So we are abiding by this. And then, of course, the American State Department, in the most unprecedented move I have seen ever, level 4 for travel advisory. That means, Nara, do not travel. It covers the entire world. This level 4 is usually reserved for countries with a state of war. Think of Yemen or Somalia. And that is what the U.S. government is telling all of its citizens. Do not travel abroad. So a really, really stringent efforts coming out of the U.S. today, Nara.
Here's a CBC backgrounder.
The urgent message to stay home appears to finally be getting through. In California, the notoriously busy highways are nearly empty. The hustle and bustle of New York is at a standstill. Governors in 4 states have now asked residents not to go out unless absolutely necessary.
This is not life as usual. And accept it and realize it and deal with it.
You hear that? How arrogant this SOB is? I mean,
yes.
Deal with it. Deal with it, slave.
The issues you will be dealing with over the next hours may be tabletop exercises today, but they address real and critical threats, which we at WHO...
Sorry about that, folks. That was the wrong...
The president is supportive of the moves by the individual states, but a nationwide lockdown is not in the works.
Thank you very much.
At his daily briefing, Donald Trump focused on what he sees as the positive, highlighting a malaria drug he says could be used to treat coronavirus patients.
I feel good about it. That's all it is, just a feeling. I'm a smart guy. I feel good about it.
The top doctor on the task force is not as optimistic because there is no science to show it's effective.
It's the hope that it will work versus proving that it will work.
Trump has become increasingly agitated at his daily briefings when reporter questions force him to acknowledge this situation is rapidly getting worse.
What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.
Fear is very real for Americans who are now out of work.
I'm just trying to be as normal as possible. I already had a lot going on.
This is Danielle. How can I help you? This Indiana mom is among half the staff at a cafe laid off in order to keep the place running.
It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done as a manager. Because there's just nothing I can do.
More Americans are expected to be in that same position. Experts predict 2 million people will likely apply for unemployment benefits next week. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
We're headed for a depression. There is no question in my mind.
Right. And Trump says he's a smart guy, but he thinks that the reporter was a bad guy for asking that question.
I don't think he likes uncomfortable questions.
Yeah.
But who does, but it is what it is. That goes with the job.
Well, if what you're doing is real and necessary, then you really don't have a problem answering it. But if what you're doing is a different purpose, then you can't answer it. You can't answer it honestly.
I can tell you.
I think that's what Trump's problem was.
Yeah, I can tell you. They mentioned millions of unemployment filers that are expected. I can tell you that my wife filed for unemployment, and because she was laid off, and she spent an hour on the phone waiting to get through, and now I hear that others who did it after her, it's already up to 2 hours for them. In fact, the state website in Michigan literally crashed under the weight of all the people trying to file. This is a government-engineered takedown of the economy on a worldwide scale, really.
Which government, though? That's the question. Is it our government, or is it the United Nations governing system?
Well, that's what they want to empower.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's the thing. What I see happening here is a transition. They're transitioning to... Well, let's get into this exercise. We mentioned earlier
Well, don't start it now because we're at the break, but after.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and take the break then, and we'll come back and we'll start into this because this we mentioned the Crimson Contagion exercise that the Health and Human Services was doing, and how the New York Times was reporting the similarities with the current situation. When you look at this Event 201, that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Bank, John Hopkins University was doing just before this whole thing started, folks. It is like life right now is imitating art. Life is imitating art. The art being this simulated exercise, this fictional case.
Yeah, it is like that. We're all living in a scripted play.
Yeah, that's certainly what it appears to me. All right, let's take the bottom of the hour break. We'll be back. This is Govern America.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
All right, we're back. This is Govern America. GovernAmerica.com is the website, and thetechnocratictyranny.com is Vicky's main website. As we continue on here, got a call on the line. We'll go ahead and take the call, and then we'll get into this this exercise, Event 201 exercise. Let's go to Texas. Hello, Texas. You're on the air.
Good morning to each of you.
Hey, how you doing?
Good morning.
I'm doing swell. You was talking about the media, so I thought I'd call in, one of my favorite topics. The media's responsibility is to report the news, but their job is to sensationalize it.
They do it very well.
Look at what they do. They run these shows now. They'll get on one topic in order to keep their audience captive. They'll run these 2-3 week long documentaries of doom.
That's true. And the other thing they do is have the happy talkers. I can't stand either one. So
the happy talkers?
We call them head cockers.
All the people that sit on the couch.
Oh yeah.
Talk. The talking heads.
The perky people.
Yes.
Their mannerisms are incredible. I call them the head cockers. They hear something, they'll cock their head like, I can't believe I just heard that from him, me. They got to get this corona stuff over pretty quick. They keep talking about the curve. They want to get to the max where everybody that's going to get infected, and then we make that turn down,
Yeah.
That's coming. They're going to have to hurry because the next topic, the next documentary of doom has got to be the flooding that's fixing to happen.
Flood the zone.
Got to cover that. They got to cover that wall to wall to get the climate change propaganda going.
Oh, don't kid yourself. This virus thing will be blamed on climate change too.
Probably.
I'm sure climate change will be plugged in there somewhere.
Make a prediction. What they'll do is once that curve starts to turn down and the numbers that are being affected starts to drop off, they'll say, okay, we're going to remove the shelter in place or the, stay in your house type stuff. But you're going to have a mask to get out. If you're in the food industry, anything like that, you're going to probably need to wear a mask for at least, a couple of months because we don't want that turn to start going back up, We just want to keep dragging it down, down, down.
Well, that's assuming you can get a mask.
Well, there ain't no mask because they're all gone.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think you were telling me before somebody was making the nurses were having to make their own mask, and somebody was having a cow about it.
Oh, heaven forbid they would have to use some ingenious, inventive ideas because, see, if they did that, though, Darren and Vicky, they're not following procedure.
Yeah, you got to follow them regulations now.
The women could just get a burqa. That's, solution.
There you go. The Muslims Middle Easterners have the right idea. Let's just cover us all from head to toe, so only our eyeballs are showing.
To make a mask clean, let's see, a stapler, a couple of rubber bands, and some media.
Yeah.
Well, a paper clip to put for that nose crimping on top. The paper clip would work, and I'm sure in a hospital you can find a stapler, a few rubber bands, and some paper clips. All you need is the media.
Well, we're Americans. We can't do that anymore.
It might not be N95, but I bet you it qualifies as N80.
The problem with it is nobody would be making any money.
There you go.
So,
what would 3M do?
Yeah, with all these masks that they rushed into production.
Yeah, they might sit on the shelf. And just like all the toilet paper will, when people quit realizing that a whole basement full of this stuff is probably enough.
Yeah, my neighbor, he's pretty big in the market. Every now and then he dabbles in it, and he goes, well, all my buddies and me, we figured out when it's safe to get back in the market.
When it gets down to zero?
Dave, what? Huh?
when the Dow gets down to zero?
No, when there's toilet paper back on.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'll see you guys later. Hey, I'm listening. See you later.
Hey, thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Blessings to you. All right, let's get into this Event 201. Last week, as I said, John in Tennessee called in about it. This was an event by John Hopkins University in conjunction with the World Bank and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. As we said, it simulated a pandemic outbreak and strategized what to do about it. But it happened right before the real pandemic outbreak. So how many of these drills have we seen gone live? And here we go again, folks. Here's some introductory comments about the event.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anita Cicero, Deputy Director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. And today I will be your Master of Ceremonies for Event 201. On behalf of our center and our partners, the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our audience here in New York. The goal of the Event 201 exercise is to illustrate the potential consequences of a pandemic and the kinds of societal and economic challenges it would pose. The scenario also highlights the very critical role that global business and public-private partnerships play in preparing for and responding to pandemics. Today's scenario is going to simulate meetings of a multi-stakeholder group called the Pandemic Emergency Board. This board has been urgently convened by the World Economic Forum, and Johns Hopkins has been asked to moderate the board meetings and provide expertise during the board's deliberations. The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic. The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society. The board's recommendations are aimed at top decision makers in national governments, global business, and international organizations. In this scenario, Tom Inglesby, the director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, will be chairing the board and serving as the moderator for its discussions. Today's exercise will simulate 4 meetings of the Pandemic Emergency Board, and each meeting will be devoted to one key topic. Each meeting will start with a video and a briefing that will provide the information needed for the board members to engage. The participants are all playing as themselves. That is, senior business executives, NGO leaders, and government officials. They're not expected to be pandemic experts. We've really asked them to participate based on their own expertise and their best professional judgment. With the exception of Tom Inglesby, none of the participants know any of the details about how the exercise will unfold. The Event 201 scenario is fictional, but it's based on public health principles, epidemiologic modeling, and assessment of past outbreaks. In other words, we've created a pandemic that could realistically occur.
Okay. And oh boy, baby, realistically occur.
That reminds me of a movie that Michael Douglas was in, where he was an executive, and for his birthday present, his brother bought him a scenario. And it was like a live game playing, but all the actors in it played their parts, but he was the only one that didn't know.
That's kind of like the Truman Show. You ever seen the Truman Show?
Yeah, I did see part of it. That guy's not my favorite actor. So.
Jim Carrey. Yeah. Well, if you can get beyond that, I mean, the thing is that that's a similar type of situation where he supposedly is on a stage, only he doesn't know it's the stage. Everything around him is being engineered behind the scenes, and he's there. And finally, he starts seeing patterns where things keep going repetitively, and he notices patterns and starts to catch on that his entire existence is being engineered, and everyone around him is a part of it except for him. It's funny how Hollywood engineers these types of scenarios. It's almost like it's part of the sick thing where they're throwing it right in your face in many cases.
I do believe it is. I don't think that that's coincidental that movies like that are made.
So this woman goes on to introduce the panel, and I left the introductions in because I wanted people to know who's all involved in doing this brainstorming.
We have an outstanding group of global leaders playing the role of the Pandemic Emergency Board members here in New York. And with that, let's welcome our participants and invite them into the room. Tom Inglesby from Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security.
By the way, John Hopkins is the one that's running that. John Hopkins is Spook Central, folks. John Hopkins is full of intelligence people. Okay, that's point number one.
And that's the school that Michael Bloomberg funded.
There you go.
The Bloomberg School of Public Health or something like that.
And you have, they're the ones that are running that interactive map that we have linked up on the website right now. The coronavirus interactive map, which shows how many people are infected, supposedly. And I would say take those numbers with a grain of salt because we don't know about the numbers. We don't know about the testing. I've questioned all that before. The point is they're running that interactive map. So they're very, very well... They're very, very vested in this whole scenario, as you can hear right now from this exercise.
Latoya Abbott, Marriott International. Sophia Borges, UN Foundation. Brad Connett, Henry Schein. Chris Elias, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Tim Evans, formerly of the World Bank. George Gao from China CDC. Avril Haines, former Deputy U.S. National Security Advisor, Jane Hulton, ANZ Bank, and former secretaries of both the Department of Health and Finance in Australia. Matthew Harrington from Edelman, Martin Knuckle from Lufthansa Group, Eduardo Martinez, UPS Foundation, Stephen Redd from US CDC, Adrian Thomas from Johnson & Johnson, and Hasti Taggi from NBC Universal Media, and Lavin Theroux from the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Welcome.
Okay, so now that you know who the panelists are, let's get down to business. First, we have comments by Dr. Michael Ryan, Executive Director of the World Health Organization Health Emergencies Program.
The issues you will be dealing with over the next hours may be tabletop exercises today, but they address real and critical threats which we at WHO take very seriously. Without a question, epidemic risk has become a global strategic concern. I don't think we've ever been in a situation where we have had to respond to so many health emergencies at once. This is a new normal. I don't expect the frequency of these epidemics to...
Did you hear that, folks?
A new normal. Yep. And the thing is that we know these people want to depopulate the earth. So this whole thing is so psychopathic. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That it's going on, and they're doing it in public, right in our face, and nobody's talking about it. They're just letting it happen. Just let it happen.
People have to ask questions, that's for sure.
I don't expect the frequency of these epidemics to reduce, and in fact, vulnerabilities all over the world, developed and developing countries, have increased, not decreased, driven by many, many factors, mainly through human behaviour, economic development, population density, and many others. The scenario you will be presented with this morning could easily become a shared reality one day.
Okay, so he goes on to discuss their goals.
WHO's priorities are to establish a minimum capacity to detect and respond in each country around the world, to develop global strategies for the containment and control of individual disease threats, and develop global mechanisms to ensure cross-sectoral and multinational, multilateral coordination. Innovation and partnership across all sectors are needed, including joint strategies between global health leaders and the drivers of travel, communication, data technology industries. WHO is working at all levels through a variety of partnerships to strengthen national and regional preparedness, such as GORN, the Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network, the Pandemic Supply Chain Network, part of the Epidemic Readiness Accelerator, which is a project of the World Economic Forum in partnership with many, including WHO. It's a public-private collaboration to develop a globally connected supply chain that can support health emergency operations during a pandemic.
A globally connected supply chain.
Yeah.
Isn't that what got us in trouble here?
And isn't it this alleged pandemic, isn't it in many countries, and aren't they keeping us up to date, what's going on in other countries? I mean, this kind of thing could almost drive me insane, because it's so dangerous and so treacherous, and nobody is doing anything about it.
Well,
I mean,
there's not a whole
like
lot you can do about it. I mean,
Hitler movie unfold. You see it right in front of your eyes, and everybody's kicking back in a barbecue for the weekend. It's all good.
Well, if you have a barbecue, you have to practice your social distancing, so you can't have very many people. Can't have very many people over. But no, I mean, the thing is there's not a whole lot you can do about this right now, other than question it, and I guess that's what we're doing here. But I really don't know how you would stop it, other than to organize a bunch of people. But even now, I mean, it isn't like you can organize a protest. In many places, they're going to you'll get arrested for it.
Yeah, no, it would take a real government in a real country with people who really care about their country.
It might take
the people in it.
If it continues, it might take people with civil disobedience, because I don't know how long this is going to go on. Right now, people are being relatively civil. But as this thing continues to progress, I could see civil unrest breaking out. But it won't, unfortunately, knowing the American people like I seem to do, it won't be civil unrest that's channeled at the proper venue, if you get my drift. It should be constructive protests. I'm not calling for violence or anything like that. So, Homeland Security spooks, just calm down a little bit, because we know you're listening. The point is, though, is that I think I could see, people need to push back. And I guess that's the frustration that I see, is the same thing I'm sharing. I think you're sharing the same frustration. There needs to be pushback. And where's the pushback? People are they're believing everything they're told. And haven't we been lied to enough that we should know to question everything we're being told? I'm not saying people aren't getting sick. I believe they are getting sick. I believe that there are problems associated, and there may very well be this virus is spreading, and it could be the coronavirus, or could be a combination of things. I'm sure it's very bad for people who are getting ill with whatever this is. But the point is that this draconian government response to a flu is something that should alarm everyone. They're taking advantage of it, people. Anyway, continuing on.
A big clue, people.
Yes.
A big clue.
So the way this works, they're showing a video which provides a scenario, and then the panel discusses it. Here's the first scenario.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds.
Now keep in mind, this is October 19th that this exercise took place. The scenario they're describing was simulated and imaginary. But imagine how similar this simulation is to present-day reality.
Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. At first, the spread was limited to those with close contacts, healthcare personnel, co-workers, and families. But now it's spreading rapidly throughout local communities. International travel has turned local epidemics into a pandemic spanning the globe. Just 3 months ago, CAPS started in South America, but has now reached several countries with more than 30,000 cases and nearly 2,000 deaths.
Continuing our coverage of the newly discovered CAPS disease and the scope of its deadly outbreaks. There are now more than 30,000 reported cases. Experts warn this may be just the beginning of a global problem. GNN science reporters have produced a video about what we know so far about CAPS, the virus, the outbreak, and the resulting chaos.
CAPS is a novel coronavirus related to those viruses that caused the frightening SARS epidemic in 2003 and the deadly MERS outbreaks in recent years. Scientists think each infected person in turn infects on average 2 more people. This disease is proving more transmissible than SARS or MERS and about as contagious as influenza. Essentially, the cumulative number of cases is doubling every week. At this rate, we can expect to see 16 times as many cases in a month unless we find a way to interrupt transmission. The virus appears to be spreading rapidly in densely populated and impoverished neighborhoods in some megacities in South America. CAPS is a serious respiratory disease. More than half of the recognized cases have required hospital care, creating a huge strain on healthcare systems. The fatality rate is about 10%. For comparison, CAPS is about as lethal as SARS and 2 to 4 times more lethal than the 1918 influenza pandemic, the worst pandemic on record. Even so, some people only exhibit mild flu-like symptoms, not requiring treatment in a hospital. Alarmingly, those people are able to walk around and spread the virus, not realizing they are doing so. Even worse, international travelers have been arriving at their destinations symptom-free, but within a matter of hours, becoming ill. Travel-related cases have blossomed into outbreaks in a number of locations and have quickly grown faster than health authorities could respond and contain them. Global public health experts are very concerned about this disease because it appears the virus is readily transmitted through the air from person to person. Essentially, all people are susceptible. Experts agree unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere. Models developed by leading public health authorities indicate a CAPS pandemic could lead to an outcome worse than the 1918 influenza, which killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Given the global population is 4 times larger than it was in 1918, if these models prove accurate, we could be looking at hundreds of millions of deaths over the next year or 2.
So, here are the panelists to answer the question, starting with representative from Johnson & Johnson and, moving around the table. Let's see. I got ahead of myself. They simulated shortages of face masks, discussed the lack of a vaccine, and discussed drugs that were experimental for the pandemic, but effective for the other uses such as HIV. All are things that are currently in the news as real today. So you got the simulation there, and you have things today in the news that are real, that are following the simulation. It's remarkable. Just months following this so-called fictional simulation, and this is a simulation that, like I say, it went live. The events went live right after it was done. So here, let's go to the panelists.
Continuing our CAPS disease coverage and possible solutions, I'm joined by immunologist Dr. Yubani Bello.
Okay, I guess this wasn't the panelists.
And Dr. Rhea Blakey, an epidemiologist, both highly respected in their fields. Let's get right to it. Why are people saying a vaccine for the CAPS virus is not likely in the near term?
Researchers are working on a vaccine, and we have viable leads, but it's complicated. We have known about CAPS-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. And sure, there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult. I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic. Even if we discover a good vaccine candidate, we're starting from scratch, and it takes time to test safety and efficacy, typically years. So even if testing moves quickly, global manufacturing will still need to be established. Again, multiple hurdles.
We simply cannot rely on these old timelines and processes. This is a crisis. We have to move beyond these issues. It may be complicated, difficult, but if we dedicate all available resources, this can happen. Also, keep in mind, we need effective treatments sooner rather than later. Extranavir is an antiviral drug. Scientists have told me this could be effective. We need to start treating people immediately.
While I agree Extranavir does look promising, it's currently used for treating HIV. However, it's not manufactured on the scale needed for treating this many people. And will we just stop using it for HIV treatment? How will we get this drug in the quantities needed?
Okay, I'm gonna put it in that there. The point is that they're working on the vaccine. They're rushing the vaccine out. They're using drugs from other purposes. And what do we have going on today? The exact same thing, ladies and gentlemen. All right, at the top of the hour, let's go ahead and take the break, and we'll continue with this on the other side. This is Govern America.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order. A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America, hour number 3, the third and final hour. It continues to be the 21st of March, 2020, as we get right back into it, talking about this exercise Event 201, which took place last year, at the end of last year, October 19th, I believe, was the actual date. And we've established that it was in Washington, D.C., an event held by the World Bank, John Hopkins University, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, among others. And they were drilling about what would happen in the event of a worldwide pandemic, very much like the one that's going on right now. Vicky, you have any thoughts right now before we get back into this?
Yeah, you know what came to my mind is that this kind of seems like what Thomas Barnett was explaining that he was doing at the World Trade Center before 9/11.
Yeah.
This kind of seems like trauma-based conditioning to me. You know, they get CEOs in this room and basically terrorizing them or conditioning them. I think this is just really...
it's weird.
It's weird. It's dangerous. It's creepy.
I remember years ago when Nancy was co-hosting with me and we were on RBN, I started seeing a pattern where reality and fiction were being blurred. They had a lot of these drills taking place where, you know, they would have people barge on a school bus terrorizing school children. And it turns out, it's just a drill, and with a lot of these school shootings, it was very similar, where certain things would happen, and it would end up being a drill, but then the real event would take place, coinciding with that. It's very weird. It's like we're living in a social experiment. It's hard. I don't know. It sounds crazy. It would sound crazy to the person who hasn't been studying this, watching this, or listening to this show for any length of time. It sounds, like, what are these crazy people talking about?
Yeah. Well, do you remember that article written by Ron Suskind? And I don't know what year this was, 2003 or 2004, something like that, where he quoted a senior Bush advisor, which turned out to be Karl Rove. But here's what Karl Rove said, according to Ron Suskind. The aide said that guys like me were in what we call the reality-based community, which he defined as people who believe that solutions emerge from your judicious study of discernible reality. I nodded and murmured something about enlightenment principles and empiricism. He cut me off. That's not the way the world really works anymore, he continued. We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality.
Wow.
And while you're studying that reality, judiciously as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to study just what we do.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty fascinating.
Isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. All right, I want to
pretty horrifying.
Yeah, actually. Terrifying. Yeah, I want to get back to this exercise, and I think at the end of this clip, I think they asked the question of the panelists. So let me see if I can do that.
Causing dangerous shortages in many parts of the world.
So the policy crisis in question for this board in this meeting is this. How should governments, business, and international organizations allocate and distribute pandemic antivirals and medical supplies to the people who need them most?
Now, here are the panelists to answer the question, starting with representative from Johnson & Johnson, and then moving around the table.
What we've seen work very well in the HIV field is, in fact, procurement through the Global Fund. So having a centralized mechanism, so financially able to procure on behalf of affected countries would be critical.
The World Bank would probably be proactively moving into exercising what we call a CERC, which is a contingency emergency response component to existing loans to low and middle income countries, in which they can repurpose those loans for these types of emergencies.
Do we think, as Adrian suggested, that there should be some kind of international resource or distribution method, or really is this going to be every country for itself doing what it can to procure N95 masks, antivirals for itself. And so just think about that as you're making your comments. Yeah.
Well, I do think that there needs to be sort of an honest broker, a centralized command and control organization that...
Now listen to what he's saying here. He's talking about we need a global supply chain, an honest broker, a world body, folks, to control the supply chain. This is what he's talking about here.
Did you also hear him say government's purchasing through the Global Fund?
Yes. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. So let's go ahead and back it up and continue.
Itself. And so just think about that as you're making your comments. Yeah.
Well, I do think that there needs to be sort of an honest broker, a centralized command and control organization that really brings together the public-private sector.
A centralized command and control, folks. We're talking about global government here. Okay? Global government.
A centralized command and control organization that really brings together the public-private sector, both on a global approach and also on a local approach, because we can't forget that transparency and communications at the local level are going to be critical in the continued to stop the continued spread. But I do think there needs to be some form of centralized approach to really organize all the various efforts that are going to be undertaken.
I fully support the centralized approach in this state we have already. It comes also to global distribution of any products. And I would like to go back to Stephen's first statement. We had parallel to this. We should really focus on how the spread could be controlled better or easily.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. And I wanted to speak to the point about having the honest broker. And I think in this regard, the United Nations fits the bill. I think that given that the countries most affected are those...
Huh? I mean, that they just blew the whole thing right there.
Yeah.
The UN as an honest broker. If that doesn't tell people, that all of this is...
rigged.
I can't say it without swearing, so I'm not going to say it. Anyway, it should tell you something.
Yeah. All right.
I think that given that the countries most affected are those that are low and middle income countries with unequal access to technology, to finances, the UN has a worldwide footprint, universally recognized, and universal membership. And I think taking the example of the Ebola crisis last round, when a trust fund was established, and calling on member states who are capable of contributing to that trust fund in order to help those that are least capable, the low and middle income countries. Thank you.
Chris?
Thanks, Tom. I want to agree with a couple of comments. One is about the need to prioritize for the frontline health workers, the basic people to keep the system working. I think it's important to recognize that we have the data that you're showing because of some remarkable international collaboration about sharing information in real time about the patterns of disease. And that's come out of the international health regulations, and that's a good first step. If we're now going to try to prioritize the allocation of scarce commodities, having this kind of dashboard to know where those masks and drugs are and to get at some of the psychology that's behind some of the hoarding. People may be making bad decisions because they think it's more scarce than it actually is. So if we could have the equivalent of this dashboard to understand where the supplies are to map to the needs, a global stockpile would certainly help ensure more rational and strategic allocation. But
okay, now listen to this guy. Now again, folks, they're not talking about present day. This is a simulation that took place in October. But he's talking about having a global stockpile. He's talking about a world body, the United Nations, the WHO, whatever, some international organization controlling the supply chain and controlling the resources. Is that where we're headed? Sounds like that to me.
A global stockpile would certainly help ensure more rational and strategic allocation, but the reality is that we don't have the logistics capability, even within the UN, to bring that together in one place and run it. So this is where I think a collaboration between the international organizations like the World Health Organization and the private sector, which runs these supply chains for many purposes every day, understand where the supplies are, make smart decisions about how to allocate them to the people who need them in the places that need them the most, and then work with the industry to move those supplies from where they are today to where they need to be.
Your world governing body will ration your supplies. Am I reading more into this than they're saying?
No, you're saying it. I'm still thinking about the Global Fund, because the Global Fund was set up to be a drug purchasing cooperative, and I'm wondering if they expanded it to be for all government procurement. Now that would be...
I think we know where they're headed with this. I think they're headed. I think they're headed. The intention seems to be, to me, to empower the United Nations or some international organization connected with the UN. It doesn't really matter what it's called, ultimately.
Except if it's Amazon.
Well, the idea is governing body, but although we do live in the era of the public-private partnerships.
And they are dissolving governments as they convert over under global governance.
Well, the thing is, though, is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was on there. I got a feeling they would want a piece of this action, too, for Microsoft.
Oh, gosh, they've got it. I mean, they've got the whole thing wrapped up. Bill Gates, when did he start doing this, his foundation? I mean, he's in the schools. He signed a cooperative agreement with the United Nations, and he's been into the provision of drugs. He's one of the funders and founders of the Global Fund, I believe. Yeah, he's up to it in his eyeballs.
Yes, indeed. So the consensus is that we need a global authority to control the supply chains. We need a global stockpile. All of this global. Let's take a break from that conference, that exercise for just a moment. And now let's jump from the fictional world, the quote-unquote fictional world, to the present-day reality. Never letting a good crisis go to waste. Here's UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. This is the audio you sent me. He seeks to capitalize on the misery of millions. And again, compare the audio that you just heard with what he is saying now.
We are facing a global health crisis, unlike any in 75-year history of the United Nations. One that is spreading human suffering, infecting the global economy, and upending people's lives. A global recession, perhaps of record dimensions, is a near certainty. The International Labour Organization has just reported that workers around the world could lose as much as $3.4 trillion in income by the end of this year. This is above all a human crisis that calls for solidarity. Our human family is stressed and the social fabric is being torn. People are suffering, sick and scared. And current responses at the country level will not address the global scale and complexity of the crisis. This is a moment that demands coordinated, decisive and innovative policy action from the world's leading economies. We must recognize that the poorest and most vulnerable, especially women, will be the hardest hit. I welcome the decision by G20 leaders to convene an emergency summit next week to respond to the epic challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, and I look forward to taking part. My central message is clear. We are in an unprecedented situation and the normal rules no longer apply. We cannot resort to the usual tools in such unusual times. The creativity of the response must match the unique nature of the crisis, and the magnitude of the response must match its scale. Our world faces a common enemy. We are at war with a virus. COVID-19 is killing people as well as attacking the real economy at its core: trade, supply chains, businesses, jobs. Entire countries and cities are in lockdown, borders are closing, companies are struggling to stay in business, and families are simply struggling to stay afloat. But in managing this crisis, we also have a unique opportunity. Done right, we can steer the recovery towards a more sustainable and inclusive path.
In other words, trust the United Nations. The United Nations will be your savior.
This is, I just want to say, this is a real guy in a real position at the UN. He's the Secretary General, and he is a real communist.
Yeah, well, I haven't dug into his background.
I did.
But we know the UN is a communist organization.
He was president and vice president of the Socialist International.
Well, there you go. I know the United Nations was founded by communists, and they're very social. Everything about them is socialist and redistribution of wealth and this and that and the other. But yes, so the world government, if you empower the United Nations, you are empowering a communist entity. And so what does that say about the future, as we had a whole movement of young people today that are a lot more accepting of communism and communistic/socialistic people and endeavors and politicians. Anyway, back to the Event 201 exercise. To further illustrate the point that they want the UN in charge of health care, here's Avril Haines of the U.S. National Security Council.
Having everybody go on their own is not going to be the most effective answer, right? So I absolutely agree with the comments that have been made that we need to have some kind of international mechanism for coordinating what it is that we would be doing, also for collecting information, also for understanding what the resources are that are available through international mechanisms to execute on that allocation and coordination. I think it's challenging to set it up in a way that says that international mechanism has to be the body that decides in all circumstances what the allocation is. In other words, I think states are going to want to be able to decide for themselves on, in some circumstances, some of the issues that are relevant. So one of the challenges will be ensuring that you're using an existing mechanism, and I think Sophia's right about the UN as being sort of the base of operations in a sense, both for the funding but also for a whole series of other issues that you would be looking at for allocation, coordination, et cetera. But then making sure that states are stepping up to actually tell people what it is that they're doing, what their decisions are in that context, and creating transparency about what the proper allocation should be for containing this issue so that there can be pressure put to bear on ensuring that states are actually doing what the larger plan needs to be in that context.
What the larger plan needs to be. I thought the states are supposed to be sovereigns. They're the ones that are supposed to be developing the plan, not you.
Right.
But anyway, but I come back to, you just heard Avril Haines of the U.S. National Security Council talk about what I would call a traitor, a treasonous person, a seditious. Sedition is the word. No nation can do it alone. We need a global health authority. That was a drill last October, before this crisis broke out. Again, here's a UN chief. Now, I want to play her first comment again.
Having everybody go on their own is not going to be the most effective answer, right?
Okay, having everybody go alone is not going to be the most effective answer. Here again is the UN chief.
I call on world leaders to come together and offer an urgent and coordinated response to this global crisis, as we need to immediately move away from a situation where each country is undertaking its own health strategies to one that ensures in full transparency a coordinated global response, including helping countries that are less prepared to tackle the crisis. Governments must give the strongest support to the multilateral effort to fight the virus, led by the World Health Organization, whose appeals must be fully met. The health catastrophe makes clear that we are only as strong as the weakest health system. Global solidarity is not only a moral imperative, it is in everyone's interests.
You wanted to say something?
I was gagging. I'm sorry. Can you imagine the leaders in our country following that guy? I can't say anymore.
Well, I tell you what, as I was looking at it, I'll be honest with you, I was just as turned off by him as you are, because honestly, I felt the overwhelming compulsion to slap the guy, but unfortunately, I couldn't get near him.
It amazes me. You know, what is wrong with the people in our country in Washington?
Yeah. Well,
some kind of deadly brain virus in Washington, D.C. that has killed the brains of everybody there.
They've sold out. Anyway, he continues. I'm going to play one more. Well, I'm going to play other clips from him, but one more before we get. He's talking about, again, this is Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, on what he thinks needs to be done for people. It's called socialism, folks.
But let's not forget, this is essentially a human crisis. Most fundamentally, we need to focus on people, low-wage workers, small and medium enterprises, the most vulnerable. And that means wage support, insurance, social protection, preventing bankruptcies and job loss.
Wage support.
And that also means designing fiscal and monetary responses to ensure that the burden does not fall on those who can least afford it. The recovery must not come on the backs of the poorest, and we cannot create a legion of new poor. We need to get resources directly in the hands of people. A number of countries are taking up social protection initiatives, such as cash transfers and universal income.
Okay, cash transfers and universal income. We need to get money directly into the hands of the people. And just yesterday, here's what Donald Trump was talking about at his press conference.
Mr. President, the checks to Americans. The bill as proposed creates sort of tiers of checks for incomes. Do you believe philosophically that makes sense?
Well, I believe in a lot of things. I want to get workers money, and whichever way, the best way to get it. And I want to keep the businesses open, too, because without the businesses, they're not going to be getting money for very long. But we're going to be talking.
As it's written, is there enough, or do you want to see it juiced up?
We'll do something later, I'm sure.
Mr. President, Wall Street analysts are predicting that unemployment numbers could skyrocket next week. By some analysts, say as many as 3 million people applying for unemployment, which would be a historic number in a 1 week spread. So is a $1,000 check going to cut it? Is that going to be
We're not talking about a $1,000 check. We're talking about much more than that. We're also talking about doing phases. If this doesn't work, we're going to keep doing until we get it going. And frankly, once we get the economy back and once this enemy is defeated, the invisible enemy as I call it, once it's defeated, we get the economy back, it's going to all come back to us very quickly.
Now, let me ask you a question. How is Trump going to run against the Democrats who are socialists? He certainly has lost the moral high ground as far as arguing against socialism. If you're going to continue paying people, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, you're absolutely right. That he's given them their campaign.
Yeah. Now they could run against him, complaining about his socialism. Mm-hmm. But you got the UN laying out, we need to get money directly into the hands of the people, and you got the United States government doing what? Putting money into the hands of the people. And folks, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's your money. But what they should do is tell you that you don't have to send it to begin with. Do away with the income tax, although I'm suspicious of that too, because I see what's going on right now is the takedown of the currency. I believe.
I don't want to get rid of the income tax, not because I like income tax, but because it is a national tax.
Well, the thing is,
it is a tax of the national government.
I don't even care about that. What I care about
well, you should if you care about this country, because it's kind of like one of the final threads of what is national.
Well, we never had,
as opposed to what is global.
At the founding of our country, we didn't have an income tax.
Yeah, but that's not the point. That's not the point.
Well, just let me finish here. The point is that the government at one time was funded by tariffs on imports. Okay? My issue with the undoing with the income tax is that it really doesn't fund the government. What the function of the income tax is to tax money out of circulation. Think of a balloon with two spouts on it, one with air going in and one with air coming out. The Federal Reserve creates the funds to fund government, to do everything, including loans for people when they go into the bank. That money didn't exist until the time that you got the loan. Then the money that each bank is authorized to create a certain amount of currency up to a limit by the Federal Reserve. That money is created out of thin air, which causes the air to go into the balloon. If I'm, think of the air, only it's liquidity, and it's going into the balloon. If you don't have some mechanism to take it, currency out or liquidity out, the other spout, then you're going to have hyperinflation.
I understand all of that, but what I'm saying is
our
that
listeners might not.
It is the tether. It is our tether to the nation state. If you get rid of that tax, for all the reasons, all those reasons, if you get rid of that tax, that is your last connection to the nation's governance, and it's all over, buddy.
Yeah. Well, I don't disagree with you. I just think we're having different. I'll tell you what. Bottom of the hour, we'll be back.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
All right, we're in the home stretch of the broadcast. Final half hour to go as we continue on here. We got hit by the clock here just before going in. Yeah, I agree with you. The income tax being a national tax, and certainly I think we're on the same page as far as the inflationary thing goes as well. I was mainly explaining it for the benefit of new listeners that don't understand it.
And I don't disagree with you on any of it. But I'm a pragmatic person and strategic. And it is the national tax, the income tax, is the strategic link to our nation state. And if they get rid of that, then all there is corporations collecting a tax from you over which you have no control, zero say, nothing you can do.
Yeah, well, you could argue that we have zero control over the income tax too, but what they're trying to do, I think your argument is that they're trying to destroy everything that has to do with national this or that. Anything that has to do with nationhood is under attack right now.
Absolutely. That is their whole mission, is to get rid of the nation state and to go back to the system that existed before the Westphalian Agreement or Westphalian Treaty.
Yep. Okay, going back to the Event 201 exercise, there was also talk about dealing with misinformation and those annoying conspiracy theorists, Vicky.
Okay.
And that challenge, I think, is being proved out with the increasing rhetoric, both by candidates in the U.S., U.K., and Germany, who are saying that globalism is responsible for this pandemic, and therefore there's a rising protectionist nature to take care of their own. And so I think it's an instance where the business, health, and scientific communities need to combat that rising rhetoric and misleading information.
Going back to Stephen's note real quick about the public communication, my team has been monitoring the public response, and on various social media channels and cable networks there's been some conspiracy theories that are around about the potential that pharmaceutical companies or the UN have released this for their own benefit. So as we move forward, obviously trust in pharmaceuticals and government is very important at this moment. And so as we move forward with developing the right scenarios, we have to make sure that the public community
I'm from the government, and I'm here to help.
Is a major part of that because of these conspiracy theories.
Thank you. We have to close. We have 30 seconds.
Okay, but this fully supports Steve's input. We should not search for the perfect solution right now. Yeah. We run against time. And if conspiracy theories like this come up already, so we are on the edge of hysterical reactions, and then it gets out of control. And that's the thing, what should be the main driver for us now to find a solution.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to bring these recommendations together and communicate them broadly at the conclusion of this meeting. Thank you all for your input. We will conclude this meeting.
Okay, let me stop that for a minute. They mentioned the conspiracy theories and about how globalism caused this whole pandemic. And again, that was from the fictional exercise. I just want to point out real quickly here, right now in Foreign Affairs. At foreignaffairs.org is the article, Will the Coronavirus End Globalization as We Know It? The pandemic is exposing market vulnerabilities no one knew existed. Well, guess what? We did. We were talking about it here. The new coronavirus is shaping up to be an enormous stress test for globalization, Vicky. This is Foreign Affairs writing this. As critical supply chains break down and nations hoard medical supplies and rush to limit travel, the crisis is forcing a major reevaluation of the internet-connected global economy. Not only has globalization allowed for the rapid spread of contagious disease. Now, think about that. These are globalists admitting this. Globalization allowed for the rapid spread of contagious disease, but it has also fostered deep interdependence between firms and nations that makes them more vulnerable to unexpected shocks.
Maybe they have finally are starting to join the real world again.
No. No, don't kid yourself. Firms.
You know what? While that thing was playing, it occurred to me that we need a new clip there that says, "I'm from Big Pharma and I'm here to help. Here's your Soma."
Yeah, there you go. Now,
wasn't that the name of that drug?
Soma?
Soma.
Is that the one that puts you to sleep?
Yeah. Kind of anesthetize your brain.
Yeah, now firms and nations alike, Foreign Affairs says, are discovering just how vulnerable they are. And but the lessons of the new coronavirus is not that globalization failed. Well, there you go. I mean, that's where they lost it right there. The lesson is that globalization is fragile, Vicky, despite or even because of its benefits. So I'm not going to read any more of that, But
that is just so much nonsense. Globalization is fragile, and that's the very reason why you don't want it, why you shouldn't want it.
Yeah, the pages of that article you can use. Instead of your, you can save your scarce toilet paper and use that article instead if you print it out. Okay, so anyway, back to the fun. The session 2. Now, all that, by the way, was the first session. Session 2 was on travel and trade. Session 3 was on finance. And now, this is Stephen Redd of the United States Centers for Disease Control. Now, remember, this discussion was right before the so-called pandemic.
I think it's important to recognize that this really is an unprecedented situation, and we need to be willing, governments need to be willing to do things that are out of their historical perspective, or for the most part, it's really a war footing that we need to be on, and massive mobilization of resources is appropriate to stem the tide of this event.
So when you say things that they haven't been doing in the past, you're talking about financial mobilization. Correct. In this case?
So, are we not on a war footing now?
I'm not sure I could listen to that whole thing at one time. I might have to take several days in between.
Well, let me tell you, it was fascinating. It's fascinating to watch this in light of everything that's happened. It is incredible.
I guess I take the world too seriously. I don't know.
Well, I do too, but I mean, in one respect, it's really we have we live in the most interesting times in that we have a front row seat to history.
That's a curse,
Well, it's a curse. It's also, in some ways, maybe a blessing because we get to see it. We get to live it. I don't know. It's horrifying and also very intriguing at the same time. And I've said it before, I think future generations will look back on this and wonder what happened. Because they probably really will wonder because they won't have good history. More than likely.
If the world isn't destroyed, they'll look back and wonder, why did our parents lose their minds?
Well, why wasn't there more pushback, too?
Yeah.
Circling back around to earlier. All right, so this is Brad Connett, who is president of the Henry Schein Medical Group. a firm that supplies products and services to doctors' offices and medical facilities.
We shouldn't underestimate the power of entrepreneurship. And 2008, we saw the GDP go down about 6.5%. I'm not trying to mitigate what the crisis is happening here, but we have time, a little bit of time here, and so the power of entrepreneurs coming. Right now, most of our personal protection devices are manufactured in just a few countries. They used to be manufactured in a much broader base around the world. That can happen fairly quickly. We're already seeing things move from different parts of the country to different parts of the world now, and we need to escalate that, whether it's through the government's helping with tax breaks or subsidies of that nature to increase manufacturing of those types of products. It can happen quickly. A Marshall-type plan, don't mean to say that exactly, but a Marshall plan that can go into effect can stimulate change very quickly.
A Marshall Plan. Isn't that an interesting terminology, Vicky?
Yeah, well, we've already been in the Green Marshall Plan, since 1992. So they're going to have to give it. Maybe this is the disaster Marshall Plan. The other one was the Green Marshall Plan.
Well, what that tells me right now is they're destroying everything so that they can rebuild at a later date.
Yeah. Well, and nothing better than a pandemic, real or not, to incentivize people to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Because they wouldn't otherwise, it's the Hegelian dialectic, people. Everything that's going on right now is the Hegelian dialectic.
Right, and you have to ask, really, what is the point? Ultimately, what is the point? Maximum efficiency in the world, and concentration of wealth to, maybe 1,000 people, 5,000 people in the world, and everybody else living in just a bare minimalist existence. I mean, the vision of what they're doing. I don't know why people aren't rioting in the streets. Honestly, I don't.
Because they're not allowed to. We got a distance, remember? Social distance.
But you have children, and the future that they're going to inherit is worth rioting in the streets.
I'm being facetious. Anyway, continuing on here, there was talk of the need to refinance the banks. And again, we're seeing that now. This is a simulation we're playing the audio from, and yet everything they're describing needs to be done. Hey, it's being done in the real world. Again, life imitating art. Refinance the banks, finance governments, and build global infrastructure.
So I've got information that this too big to fail is now moving into the financial sector, and reinsurance companies in wherever they are operating might be in risk of bankruptcy. So the question then is, as a regulator or as a central bank, what then do we do? So the question here, I think, is about getting the rest of the financial sector. So it's obvious that the stress test that we have implemented over the years hasn't worked very well, or this is a case which is really beyond what has been expected. So for the ones that are failing, I think you need to step in, because if you don't step in, then what's going to happen is you're probably going to get a systemic failure across the financial institutions. So we need to give confidence to the market, and once the event is over, then to go back and review the models again.
I've been told that some governments have now fallen and that others are teetering, and that there's widespread social unrest, and governments are asking for emergency aid to stabilize their economies. And I think this highlights, from my perspective, there's the existing need for funding that relates to essentially the stabilization of government so that they can continue to provide services, which frankly still contributes to the point that Jane made, which is that we need to prioritize bringing the pandemic under control. And if those governments fail, that will actually make it much harder for us to do that as we're moving forward. I think in addition to that, there's likely to be significant amount of other forms of security unrest, essentially, that can be concerning. And that can come in the form of, terrorist groups or others taking advantage of the situation. But it can also come in the form of, famines, because of the fact that there are no longer people who are supposed to be providing food in the chain there because of, disease outbreaks in an area or things along those lines. And so I think there's a need to focus on assistance, humanitarian assistance, other types of assistance that can help to prevent sort of widespread death and destruction in certain areas where we see it, and where it's actually going to make it more challenging in particular to address the pandemic as it continues. But there's also the need, from my perspective, to be looking for the next few months. If we still believe that a vaccine is not going to be available for many, many months to come, then we're going to continue to see a trajectory of an expansion of this. And as a consequence, we're going to want to be able to make sure that we actually have the infrastructure in place to deliver the kind of assistance that we need in these different areas across the board, so that we can actually continue to manage the situation, not just economically, but political instability and violence that might outbreak as a consequence as well.
Okay, so that was from the Event 201 pandemic exercise in October again. She was calling for financing to go to stabilize countries. Okay? Now, let's fast forward to today. And let's go to the UN chief again, who is pushing for the same agenda.
G20 leaders have taken steps to protect their own citizens and economies by waiving interest payments. We must apply the same logic to the most vulnerable countries in our global village and alleviate their debt burden. Across the board, we need a commitment to ensure adequate financial facilities to support countries in difficulties. The IMF, the World Bank, and other international financial institutions play a key role. The private sector is essential in creating investment opportunities and protecting jobs.
So what do you think of that? I mean, here we are.
I watched a program this morning of an ambassador talking about the New World Order. And as I watched this woman, the only thing that kept coming into my mind is that she went to all the best schools. You know, she probably came from a family of wealth. And she's led a completely privileged life. And what is she doing, talking about how things are for the vast majority of people in the world? What we need is to get rid of all of these intellectuals who never did a damn thing in their life except live very cushy lives
and make life difficult for everybody else. If we are going to have
this global thing, let's have some people who learned life in the school of hard knocks and how things really work in the real world.
Well, that's never going to happen. It's the somebody once said the A students are the ones that make life difficult for the C students. I mean, these people with their nose up in the air all the time, they think they're elites. People call them elites. I would say they're anything but elites. But anyway, back to the pandemic exercise. This is the intro to segment 4, which is the final segment, which deals with, control of information.
We're going to get a briefing from our communications expert, Dr. Sell.
Global health experts have highlighted that dis and misinformation are wreaking havoc on the CAP's response. Health workers are under attack in a number of locations due to rumors that they are purposely spreading the disease. And response efforts in many places have had to be suspended because of concerns around violence. Pharmaceutical companies are being accused of introducing the CAPS virus so they can make money on drugs and vaccines, and have seen public faith in their products plummet. Unrest due to false rumors and divisive messaging is rising and is exacerbating spread of the disease as levels of trust fall and people stop cooperating with response efforts. This is a massive problem, one that threatens governments and trusted institutions. Polls have shown that mis- and disinformation are ubiquitous. At least 90% of the public has been exposed to these messages. At the same time, misinformation messages come from a variety of sources, even government officials. And often governments are contradicting one another. We know that social media is now the primary way that many people get their news. So interruptions to these platforms could curb the spread of misinformation, but could also limit access to information from legitimate sources. Health ministries around the world are attempting to combat mis- and disinformation by amplifying public health messaging through social and traditional media. but they are being outpaced by false and misleading information. National governments are considering or have already implemented a range of interventions to combat misinformation. Some governments have taken control of national access to the internet. Others are censoring websites and social media content. And a small number have shut down internet access completely to prevent the spread of misinformation. Penalties have been put in place for spreading harmful falsehoods, including arrests. Other countries have taken a more moderate approach and have focused on promoting fact-checking efforts and working with traditional media outlets. Yet these approaches are limited in scope. Social media companies report that they're doing all they can to limit the use of their platforms for nefarious or misleading purposes. But this is a technically difficult problem, and false, misleading, or half-true information is difficult to sort without limiting potentially true messages. The bottom line is that members of the public no longer know who to trust. Both the misinformation and the measures to control it have led to a crisis of confidence.
Thank you, Dr. Sell. So here's the policy crisis for this meeting of the board. How can governments, international businesses, international organizations ensure that reliable information is getting to the public and prevent highly damaging and false information to the extent that's possible about the pandemic from spreading and causing deepening crisis around the world? How much control of information should there be, and by whom? And how can false information be effectively challenged? And what if that false information is coming from companies or from governments?
Can you believe this?
Yeah. Well, truth is a virus, and it spreads.
How are we going to deal with these patriots? How are we going to deal with these people who are actually truth seekers and truth tellers? Because
they've been setting
internet...
up FEMA camps, haven't they?
Yeah, well,
there's one thing that they can't have, she's right, one thing that they can't have is anybody who counters the official narrative.
Yeah.
Because they're lying through their teeth. And people kind of instinctively know when they're hearing the truth as opposed to, just a bunch of baloney. So at least people who have half a brain, okay, let me say that.
Yeah,
not
a lot
everybody,
of people that believe
not
everything
everybody
they're told.
has instincts.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. All right, we have social media. They're talking about social media and how it needs to be more propagandistic.
But I also think we're at a moment where the social media platforms have to step forward and recognize the moment to assert that they're a technology platform and not a broadcaster is over. They, in fact, have to be a participant in broadcasting accurate information and partnering with the scientific and health communities to counterweight, if not flood the zone of accurate information. Because to put the genie back in the bottle of the misinformation and disinformation is nigh impossible.
So flood good information. Okay, others, yeah, Jane?
Yeah, so can I agree with that? And my fact did come from the Edelman Trust Index, you'll be pleased to know, but also borne out by the work I've done as a CEO in my time. Can I also add that I think there are real technology opportunities here. I personally do not believe that trying to shut things down in terms of information is either practical or desirable. And we do have, I think, a couple of strategies that are available to us, one of which is the flood strategy, second of which is relying and informing and equipping trusted sources of information with the facts so they can then pass that on. But we also need to actually think about a technological answer to this. So there is work that's being done to actually create algorithms to sift through information on these kind of social media platforms. And I know that the Gates Foundation and others are funding organisations to work on things like this in order that people can actually have more confidence in the sources that they will use in any event. So I think both a detailed solution working with individuals but then also thinking about technology is something we have to advance.
So they're talking about the Gates Foundation funding propaganda, which is pretty interesting to me.
I think they could only get away with that with the young people. I think for anybody who's been on the internet in the last 5 years, they should be aware of internet propaganda, regardless of which side they're on.
I'm a little conflicted because we're running out of time. I've got a bunch more clips, but maybe we'll pick this up again next week because they talk about conspiracy theories. There's not a whole lot I got left, but and I do have another UN clip. I'll tell you what, I got a call on the line. Let's go ahead and take the call, and maybe we'll save a few of these, that I have left for next week. Hello, Jerry, you're on the air.
Hello, Darren and Vicky. Just a quick note. Just that last statement on our clip that you run on monitoring the internet and what have you. Mm-hmm. Time to plug ham radio operators.
There you go.
I'm sitting here, been listening, picking up stuff here in Texas on the radio about incidents happening around the state and what have you. People driving 150, 60 miles one way to load up their car with toilet paper, or driving 120 miles to hit a meat market and empty out a local town meat market. Everybody needs to get a good scanner. Nothing else. Tom Berryhill, it's on the first hour on John Moore show on Friday mornings, emergency communication. He is a ham operator from the mid-'60s when he was a teenager. And he talks about getting a good scanner that has the capability of scanning military, local government, federal government frequencies. It's not illegal.
Yeah.
Monitor them.
That's right. It's not illegal to monitor them. It's just it's against the rules to transmit unless you have the license. These things are
frequency.
While you have it, I mean, of course, the government could take it away at any time. So, really, more people do need to be ham operators, and I'm all for alternative forms of communication. Absolutely.
Well, ham's worldwide, folks. You can communicate around the world. The bands are open and the conditions are right. Hear the music. Thank you for taking my call.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you later.
Uh-huh.
All right. There he is, Jerry in Texas. Boy, fast 3 hours, Vicky.
Fastest in radio.
That's right. Well, folks, we're out of time. We got to go. Clock is a very ruthless dictator. But we'll be back next week. In the meantime, pray for this republic. Do what you can to restore it. And keep your head about you. We're going to get...
That's a hard thing to do in these days.
We are going to get through this thing one way or the other. We'll get through it. So God bless you, folks. And we'll talk to you then next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you, Vicky.